The mighty Sauron is still alive. Yes, you heard right, because questions around his death are still in the air. Did Sauron the Dark Lord truly die when the One Ring was destroyed? In the fires of Mount Doom, his physical form crumbled, but what about his spirit? Tolkien's writings offer clues, but leave some shocking questions unanswered. Was Sauron banished to a timeless void, or does his weakened spirit still linger in the shadows? Could he even be a formless presence, a malevolent whisper in the world today? Well, to know all about what happened to Sauron after the ring was destroyed, you have to stay tuned till the end. Sauron wasn't just a regular being. He was ancient and had an immortal spirit that could not be completely destroyed. Even though he was powerful, he wasn't safe from the effects of war. His desire for power led him to pour much of his spirit into the One Ring, which eventually caused his downfall. When the ring was destroyed in the fires of Mount Doom, Sauron's physical form was also destroyed. But what about Sauron's spirit and power after the ring was gone? Did his spirit survive, hidden in the shadows, waiting for evil to rise again? To understand Sauron's spirit, we need to go back to the very beginning of time. In the Endless Void, there was Eru LOTR, the creator of all things. From his mind, he made reality, creating a beautiful existence with every detail crafted by his divine hand. Eru LOTR first created the Ainur, the Holy Ones, spirits born from his thoughts and filled with the power of music. The Ainur made a great music called the Ainulindale, which envisioned the world. Among the Ainur was a spirit who would later be known as Sauron. Some of the Ainur decided to enter the world called Arda to shape it. The strongest of these spirits, the Valar, were given the responsibility to take care of the world, while the Maiar, who were their lesser kin, helped them and took on parts of their power and wisdom. Sauron was one of the Maiar and served the Vala Elu, the smith. However, Sauron betrayed his master and joined Melkor, the first Dark Lord. Because of these origins, Sauron's spirit is forever tied to Arda. His malevolent presence continues to exist, like a dark flame that never fully goes out. Though his physical form is gone, Sauron's spirit remains, always waiting for a chance to return to power. Due to Sauron's origins as an immortal Ainur, the destruction of his physical form didn't mean that he ceased to exist. His body was destroyed 3 times in total, yet he lived on. According to Tolkien's mythology, every sentient being possesses an immortal soul. When they are killed, it isn't the end, but a release of the soul from its mortal body, allowing it to move beyond the physical world. When humans die, their spirits pass beyond the circles of the world, into the unknown, a place even the Valar do not understand. For humans, death is final and unavoidable. When an elf dies, their spirit goes to the halls of Mandos, where it finds rest and time to reflect. After a period of renewal, they are given a new body, identical to their previous one. While elves experience death as a shock and a painful separation from loved ones, making it something they want to avoid, they can eventually return to their life in their old form. Sauron, however, was a spiritual being by nature, without a fixed physical form. When spiritual beings like him wish to interact with the physical world, they can take on a body by choice, and this form is known as a Fana. The Valar, the powerful beings among the Ainur, took on shapes because they loved the children of Iluvatar, or elves and men, and wanted to interact with them. They chose forms similar to what they had seen in the vision of Iluvatar, but more majestic and splendid. Though they didn't need these forms, they wore them like clothing. The Valar could appear unclothed, and even then, the elves couldn't see them clearly. When they chose to take on bodies, some looked male and some female. Their shapes could be majestic or terrifying, depending on their thoughts and intentions at the time. For the Ainur, physical forms are like clothes, worn to interact with the world and its inhabitants. These bodies are separate from their true essence. However, these forms are real and tangible. Using them for a long time can make the spirit become attached to the body. The bodies of the Valar were not illusions or projections. They were physical and could be seen with the eyes. When an Ainu uses a body for a long time, their spirit starts to bond with it, creating a deep emotional connection. The longer they stay in a body, the more their spirit and body become intertwined, making it harder for them to separate from the physical world. And this connection becomes stronger as they enjoy physical pleasures, like the warmth of a meal or the refreshment of a drink. These sensations make the Ainu more attached to their physical forms. Though the form started as a choice, they can become more like true bodies over time, especially for the lesser spirits like the J.R.R. Using the same body repeatedly creates a habitat, making it harder to leave it. Just like clothes that start as an adornment but become a usual part of dressing, the body becomes a regular part of their existence. If a spirit uses a body for personal purposes or enjoyment of physical experiences, it becomes harder to function without it. The most binding activities are those related to the body's life, like eating and drinking, and especially reproduction. The Valar, in their divine nature, occasionally enjoy feasts and drinks, but do so in moderation without becoming bound to their bodies. However, using the fauna too often, or with too much enthusiasm, can make the bond between spirit and body grow faster and stronger. And this explains why Sauron, despite losing his body, still existed. His spirit was immortal and could take on a new form if needed. But the more he used a physical form, the harder it was for him to let go of it, making his existence in Middle-earth even more complex and deeply tied to the physical world. In Tolkien's world, procreation deeply connects a spirit to its physical form. A clear example is Melian, a Maya who fell in love with elven king Elu Thingol. Their love and the birth of their daughter made Melian's connection to her earthly body unbreakable. There are darker ways for an Ainu to become bound to their body. Although not explicitly stated, some stories hint at the deep bonds that form when dark deeds corrupt the soul. Melkor, the first Dark Lord, once had the ability to change his form or become invisible like other Valar. However, he eventually lost this power after many evil acts. He went to Avatar, a dark and secret place where he met Ungoliant, a monstrous spider-like creature. Melkor took on a terrifying form, which he kept for the rest of his existence. Melkor and Ungoliant attacked the two trees of Valinor, trying to destroy the light that nurtured the land and its people. After this vile act, Melkor found himself trapped in his mortal form, unable to change back. His hand was scarred from holding the Silmarils, his foot was crippled by Fingolfin, and his face was marked by Thorondor's talon. He couldn't heal these injuries, showing how deeply he was bound to his body. Melkor's power had spread throughout the world, but he lost direct control over it. All that remained of his original self was a weakened spirit and a beloved but self-imposed body. When that body was destroyed, he became weak and formless, lost and disconnected from the world. For an Ainu, losing their physical form through death is a traumatic experience. They are left adrift, unable to interact with the world until they can rebuild their form. Sauron faced this after the destruction of Numenor. It took him a decade to regain his form after the Cataclysm. When he was defeated by the last alliance of men and elves, it took him over 1,000 years to rise again. Sauron's spirit, like Melkor's, became bound to his body after Numenor's downfall. When Numenor sank, Sauron was terrified by the Valar's wrath and Eru's doom. He lost the beautiful form he once had and could never appear fair to men again. When Sauron finally resurrected himself, he took on a new form, but this made him vulnerable to mortal weapons. Before he lost the ability to change forms, he used his shape-shifting powers to great effect, spreading fear and chaos. Through these events, we see how powerful spirits like Sauron and Melkor can become deeply connected to their physical forms. Their evil actions and the resulting bonds to their bodies make it difficult for them to return to their original formless state. This connection to the physical world ultimately became a weakness, as it made them more vulnerable to defeat. Sauron, the dark and cunning spirit, spent the first and second ages crafting his plans with great skill. He had a unique talent for changing his appearance, allowing him to deceive the children of LOTR. Using this ability, he tricked the elves into creating the Rings of Power. In the year 1200 of the Second Age, Sauron disguised himself as a fair and wise figure named LOTR. He went to the elves of Eregion, pretending to be their friend and advisor. With his false identity, he earned their trust and convinced them to make the Rings of Power with their own hands. Around 400 years later, Sauron returned to Mordor. There, in the fires of Mount Doom, also known as the Cracks of Doom, he forged the One Ring. This act sealed his fate and earned him the title, the Lord of the Rings. The idea of putting spiritual power into physical objects was not new. In Tolkien's mythology, Morgoth, the first Dark Lord, had already done something similar. Morgoth infused his spirit into the very matter of the world, tainting it with his evil. This act cost him much of his original power, but it allowed him to exert a terrible influence over the physical world. Morgoth's transformation meant that he lost much of his angelic power, gaining instead a dreadful grip on the material world. Because of this, the Valar were often hesitant to engage him directly, knowing that any battle would cause enormous destruction. They fought Morgoth with physical force, aware that direct combat would lead to significant ruin whether they won or lost. Sauron followed a similar path. To control the other Rings of Power, he poured a large part of his own power and spirit into the One Ring. This process made him incredibly strong, but also vulnerable. If the ring were destroyed, so would a crucial part of Sauron's power. The One Ring became the key to Sauron's survival. As long as the ring existed, so did Sauron's spirit and magic, even if he did not physically possess it. The ring's continued existence meant that Sauron's dark influence remained active and potent. Sauron's ability to deceive and manipulate was vital to his success. By presenting himself as LOTR, he managed to gain the elves' trust and convince them to create powerful artifacts that he could then control. His creation of the One Ring was the culmination of his deceit, embedding a part of himself into the ring to control the others. The forging of the One Ring was a master stroke of cunning and power. Sauron's act of binding his spirit to the ring gave him great strength, but also exposed his greatest weakness. If the ring was ever destroyed, it would mean the end of Sauron's dark reign. This duality made the One Ring both a source of immense power and a fatal flaw, tying Sauron's fate to the small, unassuming object that would ultimately decide the outcome of the struggle for Middle-earth. Sauron, the Dark Sorcerer, was a master of deception. After forging the One Ring, he took on another disguise and called himself Zegor the Great. With the power of his new ring, he quickly became a powerful ruler in Middle-earth. Many men joined him, fought for him, and pledged their loyalty. In his arrogance, Sauron gave himself grand titles like the King of Men, the Lord of the Earth, the Lord of the World, and even the King of Kings. The last title infuriated Ar-Pharazôn, the powerful king of Numenor, who then decided to wage war against Sauron. The mighty forces of Numenor were too strong for Sauron. He was captured and taken to Numenor. There, using his cunning and persuasive skills, Sauron tricked Ar-Pharazôn and the people of Numenor. He led them into worshipping Melkor, the first Dark Lord, and promised them eternal life. Sauron convinced the king to defy the gods and attack the sacred land of Valinor. When the Numenorian fleet reached the shores of Aemon, Eru-Iluvatar, the supreme deity, intervened. Manwë, the leader of the Valar, called upon Iluvatar for help. In response, Iluvatar changed the world. A massive chasm opened in the sea between Numenor and the Deathless Lands. The fleets of Numenor were swallowed by the abyss, and the island itself sank beneath the waves. The king and his warriors who had set foot on Aman were buried under falling hills, trapped in the caves of the Forgotten until the end of time. As Numenor was destroyed, Sauron's physical form was lost, but his spirit was not defeated. It fled back to Middle-earth and found refuge in the dark fortress of Barad-dûr. Here, Sauron discovered that he could no longer change his form. He was now trapped in the fearsome shape he had created for himself, bound forever as the Dark Lord. Though his body was gone, Sauron's spirit rose from the depths and returned to Mordor. He reclaimed the One Ring and took on a new, terrifying appearance. Known as the Eye of Sauron, his gaze was so dreadful that few could endure it. Some believe that Sauron lost his ability to change shape because he grew weaker with each defeat. The idea is common among fans, who think that Sauron emerged diminished after every fall. However, Gandalf, the wise wizard, revealed that if Sauron had regained the One Ring in the Third Age, his strength would have been greater than ever. Gandalf explained that the One Ring contained a large part of Sauron's power. If he recovered it, he would regain control over all the other rings and become stronger than before. This meant that Sauron was still extremely dangerous, even though he had become more vulnerable. In his physical form, Sauron was subject to many limitations. He could no longer move effortlessly between realms or deceive others with a fair appearance. This vulnerability made him more susceptible to the actions of his enemies, but it also made him more dangerous in his desperation to reclaim his lost power. After the destruction of Numenor, Sauron fled back to Middle-earth and settled in his fortress, Barad-dûr. Here he could no longer change his form, making him more vulnerable. He feared the destruction of his body more than ever. When the last alliance of elves and men marched into Mordor, they laid siege to Barad-dûr for 7 long years. Sauron, feeling the pressure and fearing for his life, remained hidden in his fortress, but his enemies were relentless. During this siege, many lives were lost, including Anarion, the son of Elendil. The situation became so dire that Sauron was forced to come out and fight. In a fierce battle, Sauron confronted Gil-galad, the Elven King, and Elendil, the High King of Men. Both Gil-galad and Elendil were killed in the struggle, and Elendil's sword, Narsil, broke under him as he fell. However, Sauron was also defeated. Isildur, Elendil's son, took up the broken sword and used its hilt shard to cut the One Ring from Sauron's hand, which led to Sauron's downfall. By losing the ring, Sauron's power was greatly diminished. The ring held a significant part of his essence, and without it, he was left deeply wounded and unable to amplify his dark powers. Sauron's spirit fled and hid in remote places, unable to take a physical form for many years. This loss of the ring was a severe blow to him, as it meant he could no longer exert his influence as he once did. The One Ring was essential for Sauron's power. It contained a large portion of his inherent strength, and while he wore it, his power was enhanced. Even when he did not wear it, the ring was still connected to him, keeping his power intact unless someone else seized it. If a strong and heroic person like Aragorn had claimed the ring, they could have challenged and possibly overthrown Sauron, taking his place. Isildur, who had cut the ring from Sauron's hand, did not get the chance to use it against him. Soon after, Isildur was killed, and the ring was lost in the waters of the Anduin River, where it remained hidden for 2,461 years. During this time, Sauron began to slowly rebuild his strength. Even without the ring, his spirit lingered, and the threat of his return loomed over Middle-earth. Sauron's ability to rise again after each defeat showed his tenacity and the enduring threat he posed to Middle-earth. The hidden ring allowed him to gradually regain his strength, and the world once again felt the chill of his shadow. Despite being twice defeated, Sauron's dark influence persisted, a proof to the lingering power of the One Ring and his unyielding will. Even without the One Ring, Sauron was still a dangerous force. Though he had been defeated before, by the year 1050 of the Third Age, he began to regain his power. The White Council thought they had chased Sauron out of Mirkwood, but he returned even stronger in Mordor. His fortress, the Dark Tower, was rebuilt, and from there, his influence spread across the land. Sauron's dark power reached far and wide, causing wars in the east and south. Fear grew among the people, and creatures of darkness thrived. Orcs multiplied in the mountains, and trolls became more intelligent and armed with deadly weapons. There were also rumors of even more terrifying beings, though their names were unknown. Sauron managed to create a new body for himself, but he could not restore the finger that Isildur had cut off. This ancient wound was a constant reminder of his past defeat. Yet, if he could reclaim the One Ring, he would become so powerful that no one in Middle-earth could stand against him. Gandalf explained to the leaders of Middle-earth that if Sauron regained the One Ring, their efforts would be in vain. His victory would be swift and complete, and no one could foresee an end to his rule as long as the world existed. Sauron's rise to power would mean absolute control, with everyone forced to submit to his will. However, Sauron never regained the One Ring. It was destroyed in the fires of Mount Doom, which brought about his final downfall. Tolkien describes this dramatic end vividly. As the ring fell into the fire, the earth shook, and a vast darkness rose into the sky above Mordor. The Black Gate crumbled, and the towers of the Teeth swayed and fell. The mighty walls collapsed, and a roaring noise echoed through the land. Gandalf declared that Sauron's realm had ended, and that the ring-bearer had completed his quest. As the leaders of the Free Peoples looked south towards Mordor, they saw a huge shadow rising against the clouds, crowned with lightning. This shadow, enormous and terrifying, stretched out a vast hand towards them in a final act of malice. This scene shows the endurance of Sauron's spirit, lingering even after the destruction of the ring. His shadowy form was soon lost to a great wind, perhaps sent by Manwë, the leader of the Valar. This wind blew Sauron's weakened form away, signaling the true end of his power. This final, haunting image of Sauron's spirit was the last that mortal eyes would ever see. It marked the conclusion of his long and dark influence over Middle-earth. The forces he commanded and the lands he controlled fell into chaos, ending his reign for good. With the destruction of the One Ring, everything tied to Sauron's power fell apart in a dramatic collapse. The forces he controlled and the lands under his influence disintegrated, leading to chaos and disorder. This marked the definitive end of his reign. Sauron's spirit, however, did not simply vanish. Instead, it transformed into a massive shadow, filling the sky with darkness. This shadow stretched across the sky, creating an atmosphere of fear and dread. In a final act of malice, the shadow extended a threatening hand towards the men gathered at the Black Gate. Even after the ring was destroyed, Sauron's spirit endured like a lingering ghost. His shadowy form, though powerful, was eventually swept away by a great wind. And this wind, perhaps sent by Manwë, the leader of the Valar, was strong enough to disperse even Sauron's essence. This final image of Sauron's shadow being blown away signified the end of his influence. It showed that he had become so weak that even a strong wind could erase his last form. After the destruction of the One Ring, Sauron's spirit lost its form and drifted aimlessly, unable to influence the world. In The Return of the King, Gandalf's words give us a clear understanding of Sauron's fate if the ring were destroyed. If it is destroyed, then he will fall, and his fall will be so low that none can foresee his arising ever again. For he will lose the best part of the strength that was native to him in his beginning, and all that was made or begun with that power will crumble, and he will be maimed forever, becoming a mere spirit of malice that gnaws itself in the shadows, but cannot again grow or take shape. So a great evil of this world will be removed. This passage reveals two important truths about Sauron's destiny. First, it tells us that his spirit, now unable to take physical form, would be condemned to gnaw itself in the shadows. Sauron, who once sought to control and dominate all, would now watch as the world enjoyed the freedom he despised. People would live, dance, and dream without the chains he tried to place on them. For Sauron, a being who thrived on order and control, seeing the world in such a state of freedom would be a torment. To him, this freedom would seem like chaos, and watching it unfold would cause him constant agony. His spirit would writhe in the shadows, powerless to shape the world into the strict order he once envisioned. Second, the passage also tells us that Sauron would no longer be able to take a physical form or exert his will in any way. He would be reduced to a mere shadow, a ghost of his former self, unable to influence the world. Tolkien further explains his fate in a letter, writing, "There was another weakness. If the One Ring was actually unmade, annihilated, then its power would be dissolved. Sauron's own being would be diminished to vanishing point, and he would be reduced to a shadow, a mere memory of malicious will." As we explore the final fate of Sauron, a compelling question arises. What happened to the spirit of this once mighty Dark Lord after the destruction of the One Ring? To answer this, let's delve into various sources and interpretations. First, let's review a significant quote from the lore in the Silmarillion, a book written by J.R.R. Tolkien that contains ancient stories of Middle-earth. This passage provides a dramatic view of Sauron's final resting place. Quote, "Sauron, who was once a Maya or Ole and served under Morgoth, walked a dark path of evil. When Morgoth was cast into the void, Sauron followed, becoming a shadow of his former master. According to this ancient lore, Sauron, stripped of his power, would be thrown into the same timeless void, a vast, empty darkness, where he would remain with Morgoth. In this endless realm, the two dark beings would linger together, waiting for the end of the world." This passage paints a grim picture of Sauron's end. It suggests that, after losing the One Ring, Sauron's power diminished so greatly that he was cast into a boundless, dark chasm. There he would join Morgoth, the first Dark Lord, at a place beyond the reach of time and space. However, it is important to remember that the Silmarillion was not published during Tolkien's lifetime, and thus we never received Tolkien's final approval on its details. The story was compiled and edited posthumously, which means it reflects the editor's interpretations and not necessarily Tolkien's last thoughts. Additionally, the term path down into the void might simply be a dramatic expression, indicating that Sauron followed into Morgoth's footsteps into darkness. It doesn't necessarily mean he ended up in a literal, endless void, but rather that he continued on a path of darkness similar to Morgoth's. We must also consider that the Silmarillion comes from the Eldar, an ancient race with their own biases. Their account of events might not be completely reliable. Their perspective could be influenced by their own experiences and viewpoints, making their description of Sauron's fate less objective. Given these factors, many fans and scholars turn to the works published during Tolkien's lifetime for more insight into Sauron's fate. In Morgoth's Ring, another text by Tolkien, we find a different perspective. Tolkien speculated on whether a Maya like Sauron, who has been stripped of power, could evolve into a type of supernatural being feared by many. He suggested that Sauron, reduced to a powerless state, might become a shadowy presence, a kind of spirit or ghost haunting the world. According to this view, Sauron's spirit, now powerless and diminished, could remain in the world as a mere shadow of his former self. He might not have the strength to exert influence or control, but could still linger in the background. Some suggest that such a diminished spirit might resemble a poltergeist, an entity known for making small disturbances and noises as a way of showing its presence. This raises an intriguing question. Could Sauron's essence still be around today? Could he be a lingering force, moving objects, or creating unsettling sounds to remind us of his presence? It's a haunting thought that Sauron, in his diminished state, might still be watching, filled with hatred and malice, as he witnesses the freedom and joy that he could never control. While the Silmarillion offers a dramatic view of Sauron's final fate, suggesting he was cast into an endless void with Morgoth, this is just one interpretation. Given the potential biases and the fact that Tolkien did not publish this work himself, it is not the only explanation. Tolkien's other writings suggest that Sauron's spirit, though weakened and powerless, could still exist in some form, haunting the world as a faint echo of his former self. Whether or not he can still affect our world is a matter of speculation, but the idea that he could be a lingering dark presence adds a chilling element to his already dark legacy. So, do you also believe that Sauron's still alive? Do you believe his spirit's still there? We're waiting for your views in the comment section below, and for more great videos, please subscribe to our channel.